In most cases of hoax hate crimes or just general hoaxes for political goals, at least that I see, resolution never happens. The claim is just thrown out there to serve some end. That end is served, and that end is certainly not solving who actually committed this crime, supposedly. Oh man, I can't believe one of those very real, actual Nazis botched his swastika practice on my garage door. Please donate 10 grand to my GoFundMe so I can buy $50 worth of paint to fix it. The claim is made, the prize is collected, and then everybody just moves on. Because it was about the prize the whole time. It was never about the truth. That's the script this sort of event follows. Very rarely do we actually get a Jussie-style investigation into the hoaxer. In fact, very rarely do we even get a public identification of the hoaxer at all. The story just fades away, only to be reenacted according to the same script for the same purposes, and the cycle just repeats. And those who ignore or downplay the hoaxes will tell you that they're rare and thus less deserving of your attention than the real ones, supposedly much more common, without any data backing that assessment. In fact, a recent analysis in the Washington Post about supposed hate crimes in New Jersey showed the opposite conclusion. Of over 1,400 claimed hate crimes in the state in 2020, the FBI could only substantiate just under 400 of them. Nearly 3/4 of the bias incidents the state reported either didn't rise to the level of criminal conduct or just lacked any supporting evidence. So this hoaxing is not, in fact, rare. It's a commonly deployed tactic to deceive the public for personal or political gain, making it all the more important that we return to the story when the facts are actually collected, as they have been in this case, at least partially. It's a claim from last month that spread quickly and widely to condemn the trucker Freedom Convoy in Ottawa that there was an attempted arson in a downtown apartment building, and according to the man breaking the story, it was Freedom Convoy protesters who did it. And the original story had a ton of holes. I made a video about it at the time, linked in the description if you'd like a refresher. But there's now new information available through a police investigation. And for whatever valid and deserved Ottawa police criticism there is about horse trampling and chasing protesters to the end of the earth to deperson them and other abuses, I can give at least a little credit in this one particular case for actually following through publicly with the facts. The two men involved and caught on camera were a purple-haired guy and a shaved head guy, and now, as of Monday, shaved head guy has been arrested. And just in case you were ridiculous enough to believe at the time that guy actually was associated with the Freedom Convoy, as was alleged, well, it turns out he isn't. His name is Connor McDonald. He's been charged with 5 arson and mischief offenses, and crucially, the police press release on his arrest says, quote, "There is no information indicating McDonald was involved in any way with the convoy protest, which was going on when the arson took place." Wow, I can't believe the claim that had no evidence in support of it the day it was uttered produced no more evidence after 6 weeks of investigation. But given the definitive accusations and claims of fact made at the time, there's opportunity for more investigation still, because this finding of no evidence of convoy association means the guy who claimed that lied. Remember, this entire story was based on the tweet thread of a resident of the building named Matias Munoz. And Munoz said at the time this attempted arson was blatant reprisal by the convoy protesters who he said had been in arguments with building tenants over noise. And even if you think, okay, well, given the conflict with convoy protesters, the supposition of their involvement is a reasonable one, even if it's not fully substantiated. The trouble is, it wasn't just supposition. Munoz claimed to have definitive evidence. Remember, his story was that a building tenant encountered the arsonists starting their fire near the lobby elevator. The tenant asked who they were, and one admitted to being part of the convoy protest. And then the tenant just got into the elevator and left as the fire was started, which again was a preposterous story at the time. What criminals admit to their affiliations and motivations mid-crime? And what person witnesses that crime and says nothing, doesn't call the police, apparently goes home to bed in a building that she's just watched being lit on fire? These things didn't happen because they were lies. If the investigation has revealed there is no evidence of Freedom Convoy association, that means this witness claim to it is not evidence. So who made it up? We know this tenant encounter did actually happen because it's on video, though we can't hear what was said. But if it's on video, investigators can identify who that tenant is. And if this person would not say that these arsonists told her that they were with the Freedom Convoy, that means either she lied or Munoz lied in claiming that she said that. And given the stretches of the truth in Munoz's other claims, I would not be surprised to learn that he outright made that up. One of the things I didn't notice looking at this story the first time is that even its most basic premise is exaggerated. Munoz said his apartment building is at the, quote, epicenter of the convoy protest, a point I just took for granted, but shouldn't have. As a person on scene the day after his claims showed, there wasn't even a single truck there.
So this building here, the Algonquin, is the scene of the alleged arson attempt. And our friend on Twitter, Matthias, said, of course, that this was the epicenter of the trucker rally. There are absolutely no trucks. There's no protesters anywhere near here. You can't hear any honking.
In fact, there Matthias Munoz is in this very video clip, interviewing with a CTV reporter in the noticeable absence of any trucks or honking. And Munoz's story, strangely, went the wrong direction in confidence over time. It went from definitive, supposedly based on witness testimony, to speculative, not based on new evidence, just based on skeptical pushback. In the days after his original claim, Munoz said, "Man, this alt-right mob coming after me is really hateful. Whoever did this arson attempt, I firmly believe it's because of a prevailing sense of lawlessness downtown caused by the convoy. Protesters created the unsafe conditions that allowed this event to transpire. I'm not saying it was a big burly trucker. I think it was a bad actor related to the protests." But originally, it was never just about what he thought. It was about a definitive witness statement of fact. Someone lied to create that false claim of fact, either Munoz or the woman he claimed to have quoted, which is a great opportunity for media fact-finding that, of course, never happened. Instead, Munoz's ridiculous story was just repackaged and republished without any questions to the only substantive claim of fact, that alleged witness testimony. The Ottawa Citizen and the Globe and Mail, through the Canadian Press, said the apartment fire happened in the heat of the anti-mandate protest, implying an association that did not exist. The CBC pushed a subheading about the, quote, malicious intent of the protesters. All of these outlets have now published the truth weeks later with much shorter pieces and absolutely no corrections, retractions, or even updates of their prior claims. And even if those outlets were simply describing a claim of a witness, or at least witness to the aftermath in Munoz's case, several more journalists went further to affirm and endorse Munoz's story rather than to vet it. Rachel Gilmore, a Global News reporter, said Matthias is one of the kindest dudes out there. He's a pillar of the local music community who lost his venue due to COVID-19, as though any of those facts are mutually exclusive with opportunistic lying. Toronto Sun columnist Warren Kinsella chastised a skeptic, tweeting, quote, "So you're saying it didn't happen? Want to talk to my two friends who have a kid and a grandkid in the building? Or is Twitter detective work preferred?" Well, literally any detective work would be preferred, yes, because simply knowing people in the building doesn't mean that any claim coming from the building is true. National Observer columnist Max Fawcett explicitly blamed the convoy. "These are extremely peaceful protesters," he wrote. The irony of your sarcasm actually being the truth. The only circumstances in which these people tell it, accidentally. And of course, these media lies were in full service to their politician masters. Politicians who happily repeated these stories with supposed journalistic substantiation that was nothing more than the preposterous claims of an activist with a Twitter account. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson said the attempted arson clearly demonstrated the malicious intent of the convoy protesters.
Yesterday, we learned of a horrific story that clearly demonstrates the malicious intent of these protesters occupying our city.
There's a supercut on Twitter of all the many times that members of parliament repeated the lie. In just this 2-minute clip, there are dozens of them, and several members repeat the lie many different times, many of them in very similar ways, like the script was handed down from superiors and read as directed.
The incessant honking, the arson attempts.
The incessant honking, the arson attempts.
Horns honked all night long. We saw thefts and attempted arson.
We are left with two possibilities here. Either this was a legitimate arson attempt that actually happened but had nothing to do with the convoy and was just used opportunistically to smear the protesters, or we haven't yet reached the bottom of it, and the hoax has deeper depth still. I have my reasons to believe the latter, because plenty of this story's nonsense remains unexplained. Most importantly, if this was an authentic arson attempt that was just used opportunistically to smear the protesters, what explains the massive gap between observing the crime and calling the police? The arson attempt itself happened just after 5 a.m. It was witnessed by the woman at the elevator. The actual flames were obviously witnessed by the man who rushed inside the building and stomped them out. Building tenants noticed the burn marks the following morning, but nobody called police until 2:50 the following afternoon, nearly 10 hours after the incident happened. And some at the Ottawa Police Department learned of the story at the same time and in the same way that the general public did, from the tweet thread. And that tweet thread was, of course, much more interested in achieving a stated political objective of expelling the trucker convoy than it was in finding the people who tried to burn down the building. If arsonists actually did try to burn down the building legitimately, and you just use that for political opportunism, the question of who lit the fire is still a pressing one, because your home nearly burned down, and it's still at risk of that as long as that guy is still on the loose. Your preferred politics don't settle that urgency, and I don't care how politically rabid you are, owning your enemies is not more important than extinguishing your house fire. Point being, you don't delay emergency contact about such a thing unless you know it isn't actually an emergency. And several people don't delay it cooperatively unless they all know it isn't actually an emergency. So who are these people who witnessed this event and said nothing about it for hours at the earliest, or never at the latest? And why didn't any of these witnesses say anything about false claims of the event circulating in media and politics for weeks? We've only found some of the lies, not all of them. And if these obvious questions had been asked weeks ago, we likely would have found more, if the truth was the goal, that is, which, of course, it isn't. The lies are. And when the lies are the goal, well, any questions are, in fact, just way too much to ask. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.